Hi, I'm here today to give us our Tuesday talk, and it's about textures today. And I'm pretty excited because they're my favorite things, I think, in the whole world. Yep, so let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is people kind of use these words synonymously, and it's not actually the same. I used to be a weaver, and this is plaid. Clearly, color pattern going one way and then the other, and you've seen them. They can come in all sorts of ways, quiet or bright, like I just showed, and they can even be very, 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 very subtle. This is a plaid. And then these guys, they're what we would call textures. So they're not quite flat colored wool. Yeah, cat hair, sorry about that. Sometimes they're even twill or stripes. These I call textures. So often when we're talking about them, how they're used and what we can do with them, I always think it's really important that we understand their behavior. So here's a very quiet one. It looks even more exciting on camera than it does here in real life. So you can see that the values are very close. You can also see that there's two temperatures. So there's cool temperature and there's warm temperatures. And even this is starting to get a little warm. So when they're hooked together, because cool and warm temperatures are in them, it dulls it down even more than what you look at here. And everybody's always saying to me, how do you know that? How do you know that? Well, part of it has to do with experience. And part of it has to do with me wanting to know how they acted. So like maybe 20 years ago, I had my group make this little sampler, and I know other people have made like big giant samplers and whatevs, but it can just show you what these different textures do. Some are plaid, some are stripes. One person hooked, unfortunately for our sample, hooked these in the order, and that made a certain kind of thing happen, but most of them are just hooked randomly. And you can see the differences, like look at this guy here, how he actually looks when he gets hooked up. And the bigger the patch, the more it shows us what actually happens. Sorry I'm looking away from you, but I got so organized, I was disorganized. So at one point, I wanted to even show people what can happen with different textures when you use different cuts. So this is a 6 cut, and that's a number 12. It says 9, but that's what my cutter said, and I now know that's a number 12 cut. It's not number 9. So you can see how much more color shows when you use a bigger cut. And I always like to say, the bigger the cut, the more work the wool can do for you. So you can see how it gets kind of dissipated here. In here, the color even kind of changes. Here's what that sample looks like. So you want to keep that in mind too. Like even the pixelation, I like to say, with this guy, how you can actually see solid loops of blue and solid loops of stripe, but here gets a lot more pixelated. So I think these kinds of samplers are really helpful to us. They allow us to understand and recognize what our plaids and textures are going to do for us. And on that note, I also want to tell you, excitingly, here's a nice striped guy, by the way. I want to tell you that just like all the wool we use, textures have value. And that's one of the components of color. And no matter what they're made out of, they will create a certain value. And if you need to test the value, this little sampler here will help you do that. Now, many textures that we get, almost all the ones I showed you today, are very close in the same value, and that's sort of the way they are. They're made for garments, and you don't see anything too bright or too light very often. But once you know the value of your textures and plaids, then you can literally use them for anything that you want. Okay, so I like to, this is from a class I taught called the Painterly Poppy class. It's on the welcome mat. Anyone can go and start to take it. Soon as you, as in with any class I have, as soon as you go in there and start asking me questions, then I respond. So this poppy here, I just use it as an example. You don't have to fine shade your poppy. Here I'm showing a bigger poppy petal. And here I'm showing how you make poppies fade off into the distance. So you just got a little precursor to the class. But you can see the textures I used here to create this. Okay? So anything that you have, once you understand the value of it, then that allows you to just go ahead and make whatever you want. Like, I like to make anything I want to out of textures. I love textures. And you know how we talk about the rugs, the great undones? And we were just talking last week on our class, should we finish them or shouldn't we? And I really do want to finish this rug. And I will someday, even though I started making it over 10 or 15 years ago. But part of this rug is a portrait. And in this portrait, I used all textures. So I'm going to come closer to you, textures and plaids, so you can actually see them. So it just shows you that it really doesn't matter what you want to create, textures or not textures, as long as you can find the right colors, you're golden. So let's talk a little bit more about faces. You're going to be glad to know that I just created our new class for February. Don't sign up yet, because your clock starts to tick and you'll have 3 months once the day you sign up. But it sure would be good to know that you want to take it. You can see this top portrait. The whole thing is done with textures, as the same as my other portrait was that I just showed you. It's kind of amazing what we can do once we understand the value of them. And then this whole rug is also made of textures, which I used in stripes. So I put stripes across my drawing, and wherever there were stripes, I had to change the material I was using. So with not the sun, because I didn't have a very wealthy bank of textures at that point, but the rest of it is all hooked out of textures, which changed as they went through the stripes. I don't know if I have an orange the right color now, and I should investigate that. I super love texture so much just because of the various things you can do. So you can see all of that ground, almost all of it is textures. The leaves, many of them, I really don't say to myself, oh, this is that and that is this and I must use this for that and that for this. I just let everything I have just join in a giant ball and play the game I want it to. Remember when I showed you those face slices? So now you can see all the textures that I used, and they're all arrayed according to the value. And that is the key, my friend. To use anything is to understand what their values are. So I think I've talked about everything I need to. I had a little list because I don't want to forget anything. I am happy to answer questions or whatever you want to talk about or ask about with textures. It doesn't matter what cut you cut them, as long as they hold together. That's important. If you have a loose one, you don't want to cut it on a fine cut. If you're going to hook a big size loop like number 12, you want to make sure that you have a hook that's appropriate to that. Really, I think that we can actually build anything we want to, as long as we understand the color information that textures are bringing to us. And that's, I feel, the key to everything. I hope you have a great day. Thanks.